Welcome back, everybody. This is David Gordon, and I'm joined today by David Gray. The topic we're going to be discussing is Black History Month, whether it's a positive thing or it's a negative thing. And David, first of all, thanks for being with us. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, David. Pleasure to be here, man.
Absolutely. We've been missing each other. We've been going back and forth on Twitter in the DMs a little bit, so I'm glad we could make it happen. Yeah. So here's my take on Black History Month. Honestly, especially as a millennial, like I've been raised in a post-racial environment. I was brought up on this idea of we are going to be a colorblind society where we judge people based on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And it seems like all of a sudden there's been a change in the winds where now skin colors become very, very important. We're told about representation this, representation that. And, like, first of all, I don't like that. You know, I truly believe, and this is what the teaching of the church is, if you look in Humani Generis, you know, we come from one set of first parents, Adam and Eve. We're truly all brothers. There's truly fraternity in Christianity. Moreover, because we're all baptized into the body of Christ. So we're all members of one body. You know, racism is a heinous, stupid, and ultimately heretical belief. It's a theological error in the end. It's a stupid thing. But it's like, so I'm not for dividing people in any way based on race. But what we're seeing now is a lack of parity in the sense that, okay, we have Black History Month. I don't like that in the first place for the aforementioned reasons. But if we're going to do that, if that's the rule change, like, we better have a White History Month, so we're not marginalizing a new group of people. That's where I'd like to start. Is, I mean, what do you think? Black History Month, opening thoughts.
I think actually, I mean, it sounds funny. I think White History Month is a good idea. If we go back and look at the reason why individuals such as Carter G. Woodson, why he started Negro History Week back in 1926. It was a week during the second week of February, which is supposed to coincide with the birthday of Abraham Lincoln and the birthday of Frederick Douglass. One of the reasons why he started it, that joins in with what you're saying, like, hey, you know, why can't it be a White History Month? Well, one thing that Carter G. Woodson was saying was that Black folks, or Negroes as he called them back then, they don't really have a good understanding of their history. He's saying when they go to these schools, the textbooks they're using, they're saying that it is pitching the idea that everything bad has happened to Black people and that they should be slavery was bad, nothing good came out of it, Blacks didn't achieve everything, but they learned all these great things about other cultures, the Greeks, the Latins, and all these other things. So, and he's saying that and Black history has been whitewashed in that sense. So yeah, today we look at the books that some of our kids are reading. I don't think they're getting a good history about European history in a lot of things. I think it's been liberalized. I think it's been misleading in a lot of ways. So yeah, let's have a White History Month to promote, some of the good advancements and good things that, some various cultures that we call white, which is a weird word that we call white, but has brought. So but altogether, I think we move past the time that Carter G. Woodson was in, when he looked across when he canvassed America and he saw that America consists of a lot of different cultures, right? You have your Italians, your Germans, your Greeks. And you also have various classes of Negroes, those who are coming out of slavery, those who had never been slaves, but truly there's a culture here. And he thought that Black Americans should learn more about their history, and they should be proud of it, and they should embrace it, and that they shouldn't he saw in the educational system that Black Americans were being groomed into what he would call the good Negro, right? The good Negro is someone who is basically, he conks his hair straight, He prefers light skin. He wants to fit in with white culture. He wants to dress like them, progress, have just go along with all their standards, and really just forsake where he comes from, his culture and his upbringing. And so, but today, I would say post Civil War, David, that I think we've really been moving towards, the Italians, the Germans, the Greeks in this country, people who had their communities in every city, every major city 60, 70 years ago. Those communities aren't, when we see this in the Catholic Church, we used to have Polish Catholic churches, German Catholic churches. Those churches have been vacated and sold, or they've been replaced, and now they're Hispanic, or maybe they're Black Catholic churches. So we don't have that milieu, that ethos of culture like we used to. There's just melting pot. It's not there. I really think we've been moving towards something we can define as American culture, good or bad. We could probably define it as a bad thing. It's commercialism. It's all this weird stuff. It's woke in a lot of ways. Whatever you want to call it. But I think it's truly this American culture that I think your generation and generations after you are really growing up in. People are just Americans. And so when you insert things such as race in Black History Month, only thing it really does is divide. And you look at Black History Month, I think I think people looking at it, in this country, we want to talk about, race shouldn't really matter, but except in February, it should matter a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
We should talk about it for 28 days. And we say, black people are just, they're equal with everyone else, and we should treat them as equally. Except in February, we should just treat them really special, and and elevate them. It's just sins. It's hypocrisy at its height. I just think we need to bury it, burn it, and just move on. Let's be Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if there were to be invidious prejudice that still existed in a widespread, systemic way in America today, like having Black movies pop up on my Amazon feed in the month of February for Amazon Prime, I ain't gonna do it. Like, that's not gonna reverse the thing. But here's why it's such a jarring concept that we harp on race during February, and there's this big focus, and nowadays just a big focus on race in general. It's jarring because, again, we grew up in the post 1964 Civil Rights Act era, where discrimination, for all intents and purposes, at least in the civil realm, in the realm of public accommodation, is illegal. You can't discriminate against people. One of the worst things that we're always told can exist is if you say to somebody based on their color, or based on really any immutable characteristic, but based on their color, you can't participate, you can't come in. We're gonna favor somebody based on their color right now, whether it's whites or Mexicans or Black people. We've just been groomed not to do it. But now all of a sudden there's a rule change, and we're supposed to be like, that's cool. We're supposed to be like, oh, that's fine. Now we're gonna give all special honorifics to people based on their skin color for one particular month. It doesn't mesh with all the rhetoric I've gotten since I was a kid. Like I said, it's jarring. I'm a post-1964 civil rights era person. I didn't grow up with, greatest generation racist parents. I'm not a boomer where I have the tarnish of racism on me, where I wasn't allowed to play with the Black kids in the neighborhood. I was allowed to play with the Black kids in the neighborhood. I was telling you before the interview, one of my best friends growing up in Texas was Black. His mom made me not get a beating from the neighborhood bully. I'm still grateful to her to this day for that. It just doesn't comport with our lived experience. Nowadays, okay, I'm going to take two things from my life. I grew up playing basketball. It was really formative to me. That was what I did as a kid. And I'm a lawyer. In both of those realms, the greatest person, the person you look up to, just as a millennial guy, Michael Jordan and Clarence Thomas.
Was Michael Jordan Black to you?
No, he's just a guy. I liked Michael Jordan because he could jump 48 inches. He had a 48-inch vertical, and the Chicago Bulls were crushing everybody. I didn't care. It was truly we had kind of succeeded for the millennials in being post-racial in a certain sense, and now we're walking that back. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah. Do you think a person has to like become like great to transcend constructs that society places on them? Like there's this joke sometimes you hear in the black community, like, oh, Oprah is not black anymore, because she would transcend, white women would love her. Or in your case, Michael Jordan, was he so great at something that he transcended the constructs that the society like put these silly constructs of race on people who aren't great. I mean, that's the interesting thing I wonder about that.
Well, I mean, especially, I feel like in my generation, no, we just didn't have that. Again, we grew up like, I went to Catholic school, and I remember getting the lessons like in history class, like, here's what happened, here's American history, certain things were wrong. And this is like the real critical history. This is the real critical theory, not the false Marxist critical theory. But it's, education is Catholic. You should be formed in your faith as you're being educated. So you don't just study history so you can be good at Jeopardy. You're studying history with a critical eye to be like, okay, here's World War II. What did we do wrong in World War II? Were there public policy problems that went into creating that? Okay, how about segregation? How about, pre-Civil War times where we created the Southern American economy off the backs of people who were literally brought against their will and made to do unpaid labor? How does that comport with Catholic teaching? That's real history. And, as much as people criticize Catholic curricula, and mine was kind of squishy in a lot of regards, we did get that. Like, we were brought up and we had the moralizing in a good Catholic sense kind of infused into the curriculum. I think that's the right way to do it. And that's exactly why you don't need a Black History Month. Yeah. It's just there's American history and we study the contributions of people. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's spot on as well. Going back to Carter G. Woodson, so he saw like so in his book The Miseducation of the Negro. I think it's a great book to read, and I don't know what year he wrote this, but I think it kind of lays out what he was thinking. One thing he has said in his book that he looked at like three different people. So he looked at the Native Americans who didn't know their history at all, and so he thought they were paying the cost for that. They documented nothing about themselves really, academically, nothing there. So they paid the price for that. Then he looked at what he called the Hebrews, what we call Jews today. They documented their history very well, and even in 1926, this is before, of course, before the Holocaust. He saw that they were progressing very well because they had a good understanding of who they are as a people. And we can still say that about them today. Then he looked at what he called the Negro. They were ashamed of their history. They rejected their history. They were ashamed of it. And so I think that when it comes to the case he's making for what he called the Hebrew people, I think, he would say they got it right. But for them, understanding their history was just like a lifetime journey, something that was emphasized, especially on the Passover, of course. They would study, at the Seder, they would go through the whole story. My father was a wandering Aramean. So their history was part of their culture and their religion. So their history was just their life, was what they studied. So going to your point, yes, right? So if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. I think that's probably true, right? That's something we like to say. And so it's not something that you would just, if the Black American experience or the history is just part of the American story, the good and the bad, then it's just something that we embrace in a whole, not just narrow it down to just 28 days, the shortest month of the year. But if it is truly American history, then it should be part of our history and part of our curriculum all year long. But if it's not American history, if it's something other, if we're trying to divide it and still push this narrative that, blacks aren't really Americans, it's this divisive thing that I think is profit driven, there's a lot of political gain through the political agency to divide people and to push this narrative. So what we're saying that Black Americans aren't truly American. So let's just focus on their history in February, and for the rest of the year, let's talk about American history. So to get out of that mindset and to stop the divisiveness and all the ignorance, and perhaps even do something about racism, mitigate it in some sort of way. Stop talking about race all the time and stop focusing it on February. And let's spread this thing out. Let's talk about American history. So yeah, I think you're dead on, spot on about that. I don't know how we do it. Maybe we need to go to Kent State where this whole thing started, and for something there. But yeah, that's definitely the way it needs to go.
So many bad ideas have come out of academia, whether it's from the LGBT agenda, or just this kind of cultural Marxism that we're getting, where it is
critical race theory. That's also at the academia. Yeah,
right. Trying to drive internal dissent and foster discord between the races. It's a really evil thing because, again, this goes back to the fourth commandment. Like, we all owe a duty of loyalty to our fatherland. In our fatherland, I don't say African American. First of all, because it's dumb and politically correct. But second of all, because black
I don't
people
even know what that is.
Because if there's a white a white person from South Africa, that's an African American, right? So then you have to say, like, it's crazy. Yeah. I don't say it because, like, Black Americans are every bit as American as white Americans. Like, think how many formative things that Black people have infused into American culture. Whether it's like jazz. Where would music theory be without Black people? Honestly, in America, we have unique things like jazz, and obviously, what you've done with certain guys like Clarence Thomas for the law. We were saying this previous. Also, the single greatest jurist who's ever lived is Clarence Thomas. He's, I think maybe Scalia was a better theorist, but as far as like having the courage to come and stick to his guns and actually advocate for Constitution driven jurisprudence and textualism, I think it's Thomas. And it's the same across the boards. Obviously, I mean, we needn't go into sports because there's so many Black sportsmen that have really that are iconic all across the boards, wherever you look, but also in the sciences. But I mean, I feel like this is paying lip service to something. I don't feel like we need to do this because there are races, there are contributions from many different races and ethnicities in America, where it's like we should just accept that, yeah, people are going to make their contributions and they're to be valued, and that should be something that we don't have to belabor. We don't have to pinpoint it in a curriculum and create a whole curriculum about it. It's just, as you're studying the history of medicine, you're going to study the Black doctors, you're going to study the white doctors, and you will take note. Oh, that's a neat contribution. It doesn't have to be, here's this month we're elevating, so we're specifically going to talk about these specific colored people. That doesn't matter. We're Americans, and we owe a duty in common with one another to our fatherland. If we get into a big war and we get drafted, like, we're going to fight perhaps against white people in Europe together, or perhaps against Black people in Africa together. And what will bind us together, seriously, this is in moral theology books. It talks about, like, the duty to protect fatherland, not the duty to protect, like, racial heritage, but fatherland. And Black and white Americans will be in the trenches fighting against maybe white Europeans or Black Africans together. And what really matters is that common heritage. It's not skin color. Thoughts on that?
I think that's really had the root of the American idea. If we could say that from the beginning, the American idea has always been that even though we've consisted of various cultures, various ethnicities, when there's something we agree on, we go to war. Whether it was England, whether it was 9/11, right? Native Americans, good or bad. If there's something that we agree on, that someone's attacking, that someone is threatening our way of life, good or bad, the Japanese internment camps, bad, right? But there seemed to be a common idea. Hey, these guys may be enemies, right? And so America accepted that evil. And so I think that's the American idea. We should definitely move towards the good, protecting the fatherland, as you said. But yeah, I think that's one thing we've always been able to agree on. One thing I really hate about the Black History Month that you bring out is just that another point that where it's just divisive is just how it clings to, just reinforces the historical grievance that Black Americans are really taught to have. That I personally have to feel grieved about everything that's not happened to me, but happened to people who sort of look like me or have my experience. That, oh, when, I don't know, Martin Luther King was assassinated, that was me getting assassinated. I'm personally affected by that for the rest of my life. Or, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, but no, not when Malcolm X was. I'm not personally grieved by that. We play these games. Yes, let's celebrate Barack Obama, or let's celebrate, say, Thurgood Marshall becoming a justice. Yeah, I should have an historical joy because of that. That was me. But I should not have historical joy over Clarence Thomas, or becoming a justice. So there's this political game we play. Things we should feel grieved about, everything bad, and feel good about things that happen to everything from the liberal establishment that has somehow happened. So there's this game we play that it doesn't help America. The historical grievance, having Black Americans feel grieved about things that did not happen to them. Because here's the thing, right? As you were pointing out, that each of us has our own journey, okay? And my life right now is a consequence of every choice that I made in God's grace. I don't know how much of that has to do with my skin color. Probably zero, right? I mean, there may be some things I don't know about, but I would say same thing about Clarence Thomas, Michael Jordan, every great person who is great that you named, and we can name some more. How much of their achievement in their greatness, Clarence Thomas being the greatest justice, as you say, how much of that was because of his culture or race? Or Ben Carson, one of the greatest surgeons, how much of that because, yes, he grew up in a certain socioeconomic place, but you have white kids who grow up in those same type of environments. So he achieved things that some people of different cultures have never achieved. So how much of his greatness is really attributed to his skin color? So we just really have to move past this, even the idea of like celebrating history because out of skin color, like, oh, let's just note all the achievements of Black people. Were they achievements because they were Black, or just because they pursued education, because they were determined, because they made good personal choices? So it's a silly way to just look at humanity all together. Even I think sometimes we even do it in the Catholic space, right? We'll point out some of the great things Catholics done. We'll point out they're doing the educational system, medicine. There's some of that. Now we're talking about morals and values, and we're talking about something deeper there that may have inspired them beyond just an accident such as skin color. But even there, we have to be careful. Did the guy, I forget his name, who invented vaccines, was that faith driven? What percentage of it was, or was he really pursued the science, right? So we have to be careful. But such an accident, such a skin color and race, no, you can't claim that, man.
That's what I was about to say. I wanted to jump in and just be like, it's such an arbitrary distinction too. Obviously, it's an accident of being a person is your skin color. It's almost as dumb. I think it is as dumb as just being like, we're gonna have a blonde history month, or like, blue eyes history month. It's like, we're just taking, how about a big nose person history month, or like somebody with an underbite history month. We can just take anything, any physical attribute, and like have a special awareness and create all kinds of really contempt in that person, and I guess anger. And tell them like a system is there to hold them down. And it's just stupid. It really is. Like, why are we breaking people up along these lines? Yes, some people have more melanin and other people have less. Why has that become a significant difference all of a sudden when we know the theology doesn't support it? When we know that we're from the same set of first parents? When we know that we're in the same mystical body of Christ together for the baptized? We're truly all brethren. And the popes are on record expressing this, like Pius XII in Humani Generis. Mm-hmm. So, in there, the other thing I want to say, especially, you know, the bulk of my lineage is Italian. Like, that's how, you know, people, I'm all kinds of things, but when people are like, what are you? I'm like, I'm an Italian guy. We've got to get past the race, I guess, the historical grievance mongering. I mean, you look at the word slave, it comes from Slav. Because people of all different races have done some bad stuff to each other. And a joke I always like to make is that, like, there was a time when white people in America were so racist, they didn't like other white people.
Dude, that is like the craziest thing. People don't even, I mean, there's like so much history that we don't even get into, dude. I mean, even like the lynchings, you know, Southern white Americans from, you know, the ones that came from Northern England, you know, the hillbillies, as we called them, had a certain dialect in the South. They were lynching each other before they got the blacks. I mean, in fact, I think they lynched more of their own, you know, whites than they lynched of blacks, right? And so, yeah, get back to your point, but I just had to jump in there and say, like, yeah, a lot of things that we attribute to being racist, no, that's just culture.
Right, exactly. It's like you would have it, you know, Italians and Irishmen weren't exactly popular in the year 1900 or year 1850. We'd have the people that they consider themselves like the true representatives of America. They'd be like, look at this WAF bastard or this Mick bastard. You know, it's not just... It doesn't just go on like a melanin level. There's also just like an ethnicity and national origin level here. We're kind of excusing. And obviously it goes both ways. There have been racial tensions back and forth between black people and white people for a long time in America. And, you know, there have been issues both ways. Now, obviously, systematically, it's been more unidirectional and white people have, you know, white America in its past, we have to grapple with this. We've done indefensible things to black people in America. Segregation was wrong. And obviously slavery was horrific. And the American bishops didn't condemn slavery until 20 years after Prohibition, even though the Vatican had condemned it a generation before Prohibition. And it had condemned it even going back to the time of the American Indians. You're talking about like the 17th and 16th century. You're getting papal documents on this. So there's true things we have to grapple with. But it's like, I don't have white guilt. That's not on me. I didn't do anything.
You shouldn't. Yeah, you shouldn't. And I think it's like a whole... I mean, everyone... I mean, so many people... I mean, are we mad at the Muslims for their part in the slave trade? I mean, can they have some... can they have some Muslim guilt about their role in buying off a bunch of people in Africa and selling them to the Europeans? Or what about the Africans who are not part of the diaspora? You know, just the Africans who sold their own people. Some of them, prisoners. Some of them, you know, criminals or whatever. But they sold off their worst. What Donald Trump was accused of, you know, in 2016. You know, Mexico sends us their worst. Back, you know, 16, 1700s, these are what the Africans were doing. They were sending to the slave traders their worst. And so that was a crime, right? And so a lot of people historically, a lot of different cultures, everyone has a hand in a transatlantic slave trade and what's called chattel slavery. Everyone has a hand in it. But no one today has a hand in it. And just as I'm not personally affected by what happened to who may have been my ancestors, because my life choices have been my life choices, and on Judgment Day I'm going to be judged by those. You don't have any baggage to claim either, or any sins to claim either upon what your ancestors may or may have not done. And I'm not, and neither am I grieved neither do I take joy. It's a terrible industry.
Well, the irony, like, if I may, the irony is that maybe some of the people who have fallen into the cultural Marxism and the racial grievance mongering now are descendants of the very black people in Africa that sold people into slavery in the first place. I mean, think about that. That is genuinely ironic, I would say.
Yes,
and
yes.
it's a really politically incorrect point to make. But there's truth there, and I think that needs to be said. This was not just people going and like creating a kidnapping situation. But okay, let me ask you something.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that for so many years. I don't that white Europeans were just jumping into the jungle, somehow immune to malaria, just jumping into the jungle and just kidnapping people as they were running by, getting water and elephants. And so, yeah, but that's the history that I was brought up in. So, but it's crazy.
What's behind it? What's behind the recent push, the recent shift away from colorblind society to now garden salad? And I actually heard this in college from a professor. I was brought up on melting pot, right? But now we became a garden salad.
Oh.
When did that happen? Why? Do you see anything nefarious behind that?
No, I actually didn't. I actually didn't know the terms had changed from melting pot to garden salad. Is that because we're moving? There's more vegans now in academia. What is that?
That's probably like the psychology behind it. But yeah, I mean, we were brought up like we're Americans, we're going to be colorblind. But now we're going to stand apart from each other. We're all in the same bowl. We're all in the same country.
Oh.
But we're going to recognize a bunch of distinctions, and that's really let us. I think this is my experience. This is what my sense is. It's letting us be fractured. A certain factiousness has entered into America, and obviously you got guys like Antonio Gramsci who wanted to import Marxism into the United States, but since we had too big of a middle class, you couldn't have this class warfare between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. So instead, he's racialized us, and then we're making the white straight male into essentially the bourgeoisie, and stoking the flame of resentment for the black people who do obviously have a historical case to point out that there were certain injustices, but then using that to prevent national cohesion. So I mean, I don't know if that's your sense that maybe Black History Month is a little bit of that, is emphasizing these differences to stoke up the racial tensions.
Yeah, and I could be wrong, but I always tended to look at it through the political sphere and how it's leveraged towards keeping people in power, namely Democrats. I mean, look at Jesse Jackson Jesse Jackson Sr. back in the 1980s, and his invention. Well, it had been floating around, this notion of something called African American, but he was really the first one that pushed it on a national level, that there was something called an African American. These people are from the diaspora, right? They aren't truly Africans. And by the way, it tends to be the case that brown-skinned people from Africa don't like Black Americans, and everyone should know that. So to call us African Americans is kind of silly. They don't like us, right? But Jesse Jackson, he pushes the idea of there being an African American community, and what he's really trying to do, he's trying to create a political constituency, a political bloc that he could leverage into him running for president, and that really caught fire and is still with us today, this so-called community of African Americans. You see, sometimes I don't know if you ever watched my series called Mass Nightmares, but sometimes we'll go into Catholic churches and we'll look at their liturgies. And one thing that you oftentimes see in liturgies is this idea that sometime during liturgy, sometime during the universal prayers, or sometimes before the Mass, you see, especially on the West Coast, they'll face the east, they'll face the west and north, and they'll start doing this thing where they're talking about the Native Americans who lived here. And so they do this thing. You also see us going to political agencies where they're saying before their speech, I recognize the Shanawa tribe whose indigenous land this is, where I stand. And so now that you say that, this idea of a salad, whatever it is, Caesar, whatever, probably not Caesar, but probably just a general house salad, I think that fracturing, now that you say it, I think I do see it, but I think it's much older and is I think is escalating probably.
So what's the way forward? Like, how do we deal with this? What's the wholesome, healthy American way to deal with this that respects a national cohesion, respects the fourth commandment, which again does direct us to have affection for our fatherland? How do we get past it? It seems like especially the left is winning. The left is winning in dividing us. It's winning in pushing the narrative that, like, essentially the system is rigged to keep black people down. Yeah. Where do we go?
I think you're right. I think that perhaps hope in future generations. I think perhaps sometimes you just have to let people die, and you also have to destroy the university system as it is today, perhaps, and just reform it what it is. Those are the two biggest problems. I think there's the boomers, maybe my generation, who are still behind certain narratives and pushing it, and they back it with a lot of money. They have a lot of money they back these things with. They're still funding the university system and all the endowments. So those two things have to go away. I noticed one thing just being around military bases and even here in Europe, there's a lot of kids who are just a shade of brown, right? And I documented some. I wrote a book recently called Catholic, Traditional, and Black, and I was talking about in the preface to that book how it's difficult now to talk about there being a black people because the marriage rates of blacks and non-blacks is very high, and the number of children that blacks and non-blacks, especially blacks and whites, produce is really high. There's just a lot of beige, brownish looking people just walking around, man. And so I think it goes away that way as well. But we do have to continue to watch how parents, you still have parents steeped in bad ideas. There's this one kid who, when I do some substitute teaching here in Germany, there's one kid, we're in class and he's like a learning disability kid. I was trying to motivate him by, sometimes I put a stopwatch down and you make a kid's, let me see how fast you can do this,
Sure.
And so I had a couple of kids competing, kind of motivates them. And so I wanted to give this one kid, 5, like, hey, good job, give me 5. And he said, I can't give you 5 because you're a dark man, I'm a light man, and we're supposed to be separate. This is a 3rd grader. And I'm like, where did he get that from? So you still have stupid parents indoctrinating their kids with stupid ideas, and we have to accept that fact, right? Everyone shouldn't be raising kids, and there's just some dumb people out here that's going to raise the future Hitler, right?
That's right.
But other than that, university system has to go away, and my generation and the generation before me probably just have to die off.
Is that right? Yeah, the old biological solution. I mean, I feel like we need to be. I really do think there needs to be kind of a fraternity here that just blows the whistle and is like, enough is enough. Like, yeah. Who selects a movie? Going back to the Amazon thing I referenced, like, who is like, you know what? It's Black History Month, so I only am going to watch movies with black people in them. It's like, can I just watch a good movie? I don't care who the lead is, as long as it's a good, strong lead. Like, I don't care.
What did you think about BET when you were a kid, though? Was that weird? Black entertainment television, was that weird?
Yeah, I mean, I always made the jokes. I was just always like, boy, again, it goes back to parody. It's like, what if we had white entertainment television? That would be just absolutely, like, barred. That would be.
But the response, though, David, was that you guys had that with CMT, with country music television.
Oh, I didn't. But see, that's an accidental. See, part of black entertainment television. It's just because not a lot. There's exceptions and whatnot, but obviously, country music is not generally synonymous with black culture. So there's fewer black artists there. Yeah. But like black entertainment television, it's just like, am I even allowed on as a white dude? I don't know what the rules are. But like obviously I didn't resent, you grew up watching like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Obviously a lot of white people did. That was like part of the teen experience in my day. I didn't resent it. I didn't think it was weird. Family Matters, these like good, wholesome black family comedies, I never felt like alienated by it. But black entertainment television, when you start segregating by the races, that is alienating. That is a splinter. That is something that kind of sticks in my craw. Being brought up on, we're a colorblind society where we're judged based on the content of your character. Whenever we start drawing the racial distinctions, I find it unnecessary. It's like, can't I just watch like Steve Urkel? And yeah, he's a black guy, but I don't really care because his jokes are funny.
Yeah, you can't even watch the Super Bowl really coming. I mean, you can watch Super Bowl, but it's like even the narrative is there. Oh, this is the first Super Bowl where you have two black quarterbacks. Dude, it's 2023. Is that really that's something that we have to like celebrate?
Right, seriously. We are now celebrating the amount of black men in the NFL. That's how desperate we are. Like, it's mostly, yeah. And obviously, I forget the Washington Redskins quarterback, but that's like the 80s. We're getting
Doug Williams. Yeah.
We're setting all these records. It's like, but that was done 30 years ago. Obviously, it's not two, but speaking candidly, I didn't even know Patrick Mahomes was black.
Dude,
I thought he was kind of Latino.
I put in the call to the black committee. I didn't know we were claiming him. It's really, you see? I didn't know he was. So, but the committee said, because, it's just kind of like the whole Michael Jackson thing. We'll claim him sometimes, but not all the time, Well,
he used to be black. No, here's the thing. Are we really going back to, like, this is straight, like, racism rules? Like, what was it in the Old South where it's like, if you were a certain percent black, then you were black? And now it's like that in reverse. Like, we're going to Patrick Mahomes, and it's like, can we get a genetics test? What percent black does he have to be to call himself, like, this is a Super Bowl with two black quarterbacks? It's like, can I just watch football and enjoy the fact that Patrick Mahomes can throw it like 75 yards?
Yeah, because his skin tone, his composition of melanin has nothing to do with how he's a freak on a field. And I would also say about Jalen, on a Philadelphia. I don't know how much that really has to do. Maybe some speed. I think, I think Thomas Sowell, he would make the point in his a couple of number of his books, especially Race and Culture, that we have to stop being ashamed to say that yes, blacks have certain genetics.
Yeah.
We also have to get away with saying that yes, throughout the world, Chinese people have run a lot of garment shops. They're good at it everywhere in the world. They were Germans great at making pianos historically.
Cars.
Nothing to be ashamed. Yeah, nothing to be ashamed. Cultures just have their thing, and sometimes it's genetic, right? And so
I always laugh about that, man, because the same liberals that'll like finger wag at you, like, oh, you do not make stereotypes. Now I'm going to get in my excellently engineered German car and leave. Like, you don't understand. You just, sorry, I cut you off, but I had to
that's the point. It's like, it's weird, man. But we're gonna claim Barack Obama. I think that's what the black community said. They said, hey, man, we claim Barack Obama, so we're gonna go ahead and claim Mahomes, man.
Yeah, that's serious. I don't know. I just don't want to live in an era where we can't just go ahead and be like, black people are faster than white people. Like,
that would be great, right?
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. And Chinese kids are just better at math. I'm sorry. They just are, right?
No, that's right. I agree. Well, on that happy note, I know you have some time constraints, so do you have any last words on the topic? I've had a really good time talking with you. The hour's flown by. Anything else you want to get out to the audience? Anything else you want to say on the matter?
No, I really appreciate the conversation, man. We touched on a lot of topics. I think we definitely agreed that Black History Month doesn't fit in the current culture that we have as America, and that we just really need to study American history from probably second grade, first grade, all the way through, man, and just embrace it, love it. It's good and it's bad. Let's learn from it, the good and the bad, and let's just be American and be better Americans.
100%. And if I might just add the one thing I wanted to get in, like if we're going to have the Black History Month, then we need to have the same rules for everybody. Because the minute you start saying we can play by one set of rules for other people, but if you have White History Month, it's racist, like then you are actually subjugating another class. Like special privileges for one class means subjugation for another. So I'm with you. Like I think it needs to go the way of the dodo bird. But if we're going to have it, I would just add, from my point of view, we need to have like the rival like White History Month. But yeah.
And since there's only 12 months, right? I want to like make a motion that we have a month like devoted to the history of like curvy redheads. That's just always been my thing, right? Curvy redheads. And if we could just have a history devoted to things they've accomplished, which is probably a lot, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, Jessica Rabbit style, Roger Rabbit's wife. All right. Well, thanks so much for being on, David Gray. Do you have a website that I can direct people to?
Yeah, just my name, davidlgray.info.
Cool. Great. Thanks for being on, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, everybody. David and Rebecca Gordon here, and we're pleased to announce that on February 18th, we're going to be rebooting our popular Catholic home economics course live for a 12-week period. In the course, we start off by focusing on the Christian theology of marriage, the theology of the family, and the theology of the home life. But then we move into a practical application of Christian principles to the home life. So things like, how do I educate my kids? How do I discipline my kids? How do I instill manners in my kids? How do we decorate the home? How do we organize the home and take care of chores and apportion duties in the household? These are all things that people really want to know in the 21st century. And the reason we're doing this is because we care about catechizing the West and re-evangelizing the West. And the way to do that, if you believe Fatima, which we do, is to focus on the family, which is the first and vital cell of society.
And I'll be bringing you my perspective as a Catholic mother of 6. I didn't come from a big family. I didn't come from a homeschooling family. Dave and I picked this up as we went along, and we'd love to share our tricks with you, our techniques of how we run our household, including homeschooling, cleaning, cooking, all those practical applications. So please come and join us. We'd love to see you.
It's going to be an interactive course with questions and answers after each session. And we really put an emphasis on that because I know that's been a period in the past where people have felt most enriched. We hope to see you there. God bless you guys. Thank you very much.
Domestic Church, an online academy for marriage and family life.